The Galactic Defense Station orbited the neutral moon of Kepler 442c, a massive structure that housed soldiers from 17 different species. In the main recreation hall, holographic displays showed battles from across the galaxy while warriors shared stories of their homeworlds. "Greatest military achievements, Commander!" Zethkar of the Vortanian Empire stood before a gathered crowd, his forearms gesturing dramatically as he recounted the legendary siege of Proxima 7. His scaled hide gleamed under the artificial lights as he described how his people held their fortress for 300 standard cycles against impossible odds. The assembled soldiers nodded with respect, their various forms of appreciation evident across multiple species. "But the greatest warriors," announced Captain Thrix of the crystalline Zelon Collective, her translucent body pulsing with pride, "are surely my people. We fought the Void Swarm for 2 millennia, never retreating even when our cities turned to glass under their weapons." Her crystalline voice rang like chimes, and several soldiers clicked their approval in the traditional Zelon manner. From across the hall, Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen of the Terran Marines sat quietly at a corner table, nursing a cup of coffee and reading tactical reports on his data pad. He had been assigned to this joint training exercise 3 weeks ago, representing Earth's military in the galactic community's first attempt at integrated defense protocols. The humans were the newest species to join the Galactic Coalition, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 15 years earlier. "What about you, human?" called out Lieutenant Vrexth, a towering insectoid from the Hive worlds. His mandibles clicked with amusement as his compound eyes fixed on Marcus. "Surely your species has some tales of military glory to share with us." The conversation in the hall gradually died down as attention turned to the lone human. Marcus looked up from his data pad, meeting the curious and slightly condescending gazes of his fellow soldiers. He was average height by human standards, with brown hair kept in a regulation cut and calm dark eyes that had seen more than his young face suggested. "We have our stories," Marcus replied simply, setting down his cup, "though I'm not sure they'd interest you." This response drew chittering laughter from several species. Commander Zethkar's secondary arms waved dismissively. "Come now, friend Marcus. Your people only discovered space travel recently. What great battles could you possibly have fought? Perhaps some skirmish over resources on your single world? Your species is still fighting among yourselves," added Captain Thrix, her voice carrying a note of superiority. "The Coalition reports indicate you haven't even achieved planetary unity yet. How could you understand true warfare?" Marcus stood slowly, his movement drawing the attention of every being in the hall. The human military uniform he wore was plain, compared to the ornate armor and ceremonial gear of the other species, but something in his bearing made the mockery die down slightly. "You're right," Marcus said calmly. "We do still fight among ourselves. We've been doing it for thousands of years, but that's exactly why our stories might surprise you." He walked to the center of the hall where the holographic display still showed images of various galactic conflicts. With a few gestures, he accessed the human database and pulled up historical records from Earth. The first image that appeared was grainy, black and white footage of soldiers in trenches. "This is from something we called World War I," Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "My species fought this war using primitive chemical weapons, machine guns, and artillery. Soldiers lived in muddy trenches for months, facing death every day. At a place called Verdun, French soldiers held their ground for 10 months against overwhelming German forces. Their motto was, 'They shall not pass.'" The assembled soldiers looked at the primitive images with amusement. "Crude weapons," muttered Vrexith. "No shields, no energy barriers. How could this compare to real warfare?" Marcus nodded and changed the display. "You're absolutely right. Our weapons were primitive. No energy shields, no faster-than-light communication, no advanced medical technology. When soldiers were wounded, they often died from infections we could easily cure today, but they kept fighting anyway." The next image showed Marines raising a flag on a volcanic island. "This is Iwo Jima from World War II. A tiny island, 8 square kilometers. My people, the Marines, were told it would take 3 days to capture it. It took 36 days. Every meter was paid for in blood. The Japanese defenders chose death over surrender, and the Marines kept advancing even when casualties reached 70%. Captain Thrix's crystalline form dimmed slightly. 70% casualties and they continued the assault? That seems illogical. It was, Marcus agreed, but it was necessary. Because if they stopped, if they gave up, millions more would have died. That's the thing about humans. We don't really know how to quit. It's probably a design flaw, honestly. Commander Zethkar leaned forward, his interest genuinely piqued now. These battles you speak of, they were fought with your own species? Brother against brother? Marcus pulled up more images. Civil War battlefields, Vietnam jungles, desert storm tank formations. We fought each other for resources, ideology, freedom, and sometimes just because we couldn't figure out how to stop. But here's what we learned. Every single conflict taught us something about survival, about pushing beyond what should be possible. The hall had grown quiet now, the earlier mockery replaced by curiosity. Marcus continued, "You see, we never had the luxury of fighting just one enemy on one front. We've always been surrounded by ourselves, the most dangerous opponent we could face. Every human military doctrine assumes we're fighting someone as smart, as determined, and as unwilling to surrender as we are." Lieutenant Vrexith's compound eyes glittered with newfound interest. "You train to fight yourselves?" "Every day," Marcus confirmed. "Because humans are absolutely terrifying opponents. We hold grudges for generations. We'll sacrifice everything for principles that don't even benefit us personally. We've created weapons capable of destroying our entire planet, and the only thing stopping us from using them is the knowledge that the other humans have them too." The display shifted to show modern human military exercises, space-based weapons platforms, and strategic defense systems. This is what we built while we were still trapped on one world fighting each other. Imagine what we'll build now that we have the galaxy to work with. Commander Zethkar's forearms had stopped moving entirely. "Your species weaponized orbital mechanics before achieving interstellar travel?" "Had to," Marcus said with a slight smile. "We knew that eventually, humans were going to try to kill other humans from space, so we needed to be ready to fight that war too." He paused, looking around the room at faces that were no longer mocking. "The thing is, gentlemen and ladies, we've never fought an enemy that wasn't human. We have no idea how ruthless we can be against someone we don't consider family." The silence in the recreation hall stretched for long moments after Marcus finished speaking. Captain Thrix's crystalline form had dimmed to barely a glow, while Commander Zethkar's usually animated arms hung motionless at his sides. The human's words about fighting family had struck something deep in each of the assembled warriors. Lieutenant Vrexith was the first to break the silence, his mandibles clicking nervously. "You speak of your species as if they are all warriors. Surely you have civilians, non-combatants, those who do not fight." Marcus laughed, a sound that carried no humor. "That's where you're misunderstanding us completely. We don't really have non-combatants. Let me show you something." He gestured to the holographic display, which shifted to show aerial footage of a city under siege. Buildings lay in ruins, smoke rising from countless fires, yet tiny figures could be seen moving through the destruction. "This is Stalingrad, 1942. The German army surrounded the city, cutting off all supplies. They had superior weapons, air support, and overwhelming numbers. The battle was supposed to last days." The image zoomed in to show civilians carrying ammunition, elderly men with hunting rifles, and children no older than 12 running messages between defense positions. Instead, it lasted 200 days. Every building became a fortress. Every window became a sniper's nest. Factory workers picked up rifles and fought alongside soldiers. Grandmothers made explosives in their kitchens. Children who should have been playing games were spotting enemy positions and running intelligence. Captain Thrix's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Children fought in your wars?" "Children died in our wars," Marcus corrected grimly. "And before they died, they took soldiers with them." A 12-year-old girl named Tanya Savicheva kept a diary during the siege of Leningrad. She watched her entire family starve to death while writing down the dates. Her last entry was, "Only Tanya is left. She died too, but the diary survived. We still read it to remember what we're capable of enduring." The display showed more images. French resistance fighters, partisan operations, guerrilla warfare, and dozens of different conflicts spanning centuries. You see, the thing about humans is that we never developed a proper concept of surrender. Oh, we have the word, we understand the theory, but it doesn't really take hold in crisis situations. Marcus pointed to footage of Warsaw Uprising fighters crawling through sewers with homemade weapons. These people knew they were going to lose. They knew the German army would crush them. They fought anyway because dying on your feet seemed better than living on your knees. It's not rational, it's not strategic, it's just human. Commander Zethkar finally found his voice. Your civilians fought trained soldiers with inferior weapons and no hope of victory? Worse than that, Marcus replied. They won sometimes. Not militarily, they usually all died. But they tied up resources, disrupted supply lines, and forced occupying armies to garrison troops instead of advancing. Every human civilian was a potential soldier, every neighborhood a potential battlefield. The hologram shifted to show more recent conflicts. Afghanistan, where farmers with old rifles had held off the world's most advanced military forces. Iraq, where urban warfare had turned every street corner into a potential ambush site. Countless insurgencies where determination had outlasted technology. Here's what really terrifies us about ourselves, Marcus continued, walking slowly around the gathered soldiers. We've studied our own history extensively, trying to understand what makes humans fight the way they do. The conclusion we reached is uncomfortable. Humans don't fight for victory, we fight to avoid losing. And there's a massive difference. Lieutenant Vrexith's compound eyes tracked Marcus's movement. Explain this difference. Fighting for victory means you have an objective, a goal you're trying to reach. Once you achieve it, the fight is over. Fighting to avoid losing means the fight continues until one side is completely destroyed. Marcus stopped and faced the group directly. Humans have never learned how to accept defeat gracefully. We take it personally. The display showed images of resistance movements throughout human history. Spartacus's slave rebellion, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, the French Resistance, Vietnamese guerrillas, Afghan mujahideen. Every single one of these groups was outmatched, outgunned, and facing certain death. Every single one fought anyway. Some of them even won. Captain Thrix's crystalline voice carried a note of disbelief. Your species has never learned proper military surrender protocols? Marcus shook his head. We've learned them. We teach them in military academy. But in practice, when the pressure hits, when everything is on the line, humans tend to default to our base programming. If you want to kill us, you're going to have to work for it. He pulled up footage of the Battle of Britain, showing tiny fighter planes rising to meet massive bombing formations. The Royal Air Force was outnumbered 10-1 during the Blitz. They kept flying anyway. Pilots would go up 3-4 times a day until their planes couldn't fly anymore. Then they'd repair the planes and go up again. The math was simple. If Britain fell, the war was probably over. So failure wasn't an option. When failure isn't an option, humans become creative about finding ways to keep fighting. Commander Zethkar's secondary arms began moving again, a sign he was deeply troubled. You speak of your own species as if they are the enemy, yet you serve with them, fight alongside them. Because they are the enemy, Marcus said simply. Every human soldier trains knowing that somewhere out there is another human soldier who's just as smart, just as determined, and just as willing to die for their cause. It makes us paranoid, suspicious, and absolutely ruthless in preparation. The holographic display shifted to show modern human military installations, underground bunkers built to survive nuclear war, space-based defense platforms, mobile missile launchers hidden in civilian trucks. We've spent the last century building weapons designed to fight ourselves. Every defense system assumes the enemy knows exactly how we think because they think the same way. Now imagine, Marcus said quietly, what happens when we turn all of that paranoia, all of that ruthless preparation, against an enemy that isn't human, an enemy that doesn't understand our mindset, doesn't know our capabilities, doesn't realize that humans consider total warfare to be the starting position, not the final escalation. The recreation hall had become completely silent except for the hum of life support systems. Every soldier present was staring at Marcus with expressions ranging from fascination to horror. You're telling us, Lieutenant Vrexith said slowly, that humanity's military doctrine is based on the assumption that your enemies are as dangerous as humans? Marcus nodded. Exactly. Which means when we encounter enemies who aren't as dangerous as humans, we tend to overcorrect. He smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. We've been training for the hardest possible fight our entire history. Everything else feels easy by comparison. The tension in the recreation hall was broken by the sharp sound of an emergency alarm. Red lights began flashing throughout the station as the artificial gravity fluctuated slightly. The assembled soldiers immediately stood at attention, their conversation forgotten as training took over. All personnel to combat stations. This is not a drill. Unknown hostile forces have entered the system. All personnel to combat stations immediately. Commander Zethkar was already moving toward the exit, his 4 arms efficiently checking his equipment. Marines, form up on me. Thrix, get your people to the shield generators. Frex, coordinate with tactical. He paused and looked back at Marcus. Human, your assignment is to observe and report. Coalition Command wants to evaluate your species' tactical capabilities. Marcus nodded calmly, showing none of the nervous energy that was visible in the other soldiers. While his companions checked weapons and adjusted armor, he simply walked to a wall terminal and began accessing the station's sensor data. The information that appeared on his screen made him frown. Commander, Marcus called out, his voice cutting through the organized chaos. We have a problem. These aren't raiders or pirates. This is a full military assault fleet. The holographic display in the center of the hall activated automatically, showing the space around their position. Dozens of dark angular ships were emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. The vessels were massive, each one easily twice the size of the Coalition's largest destroyers. Captain Thrix's crystalline form pulsed with alarm. Those are Korthak Dominion ships. But they're supposed to be in peace negotiations with the Coalition. What are they doing here? Ending those negotiations permanently, Marcus replied, studying the tactical display. Look at their formation. This isn't a raid or a show of force. They're positioning for complete system control. Lieutenant Vrexith's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed the information. The Korthak have never been this aggressive before. They prefer economic warfare to direct military action. Something has changed. Marcus was already pulling up files on the Korthak Dominion, his enhanced datapad displaying information faster than most species could process. They're testing the Coalition's response capabilities. This station represents the largest joint military exercise in galactic history. If they can destroy it, they prove the Coalition can't protect its own assets. Commander Zethkar received an update through his communication implant. His scaled face darkened as he processed the information. Station Command confirms. The Korthak are demanding immediate surrender. They claim the station violates the peace treaty by maintaining a military presence in neutral space. That's nonsense, Captain Thrix objected. This facility was approved by all parties, including the Korthak themselves. Politics, Marcus said quietly. They're manufacturing a justification for what they already planned to do. Classic human tactic, actually. He looked up from his datapad. How long until Coalition reinforcements arrive? 8 hours minimum, Zethkar replied grimly. Our fastest ships are on patrol in the outer rim. The Korthak knew exactly when to strike. The tactical display updated to show the Korthak fleet's movement. The enemy ships were advancing in a classic envelopment pattern, moving to surround the station from multiple vectors. Marcus watched their approach with growing interest. Their formation is textbook perfect, he observed, probably something they learned at their military academy. Very efficient, very predictable. Lieutenant Vrexith looked at him sharply. Predictable? Those are the most feared ships in the galaxy. Korthak tactical doctrine has never been defeated in direct engagement. Marcus smiled, and several of the alien soldiers stepped back involuntarily. There was something unsettling about the expression on the human's face. That's because they've never fought humans. They're using standard galactic military doctrine. Minimize casualties, achieve objectives efficiently, negotiate from strength. And that's wrong because? Commander Zethkar asked. Because humans don't use standard galactic military doctrine, Marcus replied. He walked to the command terminal and began entering commands with rapid precision. Permission to access station defense systems. Human, your orders are to observe only, Zethkar reminded him. Sir, with respect, my orders came from Coalition Command, but I'm a Marine, and Marines have standing orders that supersede everything else when human lives are threatened. Marcus's fingers continued working across the interface. We are never allowed to surrender, ever, under any circumstances. The station shuddered as the first Korthak ships entered weapons range and began scanning with targeting sensors. The alien soldiers looked around nervously, as systems throughout the facility began shutting down under the enemy's electronic warfare assault. They're jamming our communications, Captain Thrix reported, her crystalline form flickering as she interfaced with the station's network. And they've locked onto our reactor signatures. They'll have firing solutions within minutes. Marcus nodded without looking up from his work. Standard siege protocol. Cut communications, Identify critical systems, demand surrender, then systematically destroy infrastructure until resistance collapses. He finished his input and stepped back, effective against rational opponents. Commander Zethkar activated the station's communication array, broadcasting on all frequencies. This is Defense Station Kepler 442C to approaching Korthak vessels. You are entering neutral space in violation of Coalition Treaty. State your intentions. The response came back immediately in the harsh, guttural language of the Korthak. The translation appeared on screens throughout the station. Coalition forces will surrender immediately and submit to Dominion authority. Resistance will result in total destruction. You have 10 minutes to comply. The assembled soldiers looked at each other with growing despair. The station was a research and training facility, not a warship. Its defensive capabilities were minimal compared to the firepower now surrounding them. Lieutenant Vrexith's compound eyes dimmed as he calculated their chances of survival. We should consider their terms, he said quietly. Perhaps we can negotiate prisoner exchange or, no. Marcus's voice was flat, final. We don't negotiate with enemies who threaten civilians. And we definitely don't surrender to anyone who thinks they can bully humans into submission. Captain Thrix's crystalline form pulsed with confusion. Human Marcus, this is not about pride or honor. This is about survival. We are outnumbered 40-1. Marcus turned to face the group, and every soldier in the hall saw something in his expression that made them understand, for the first time, why humans had never been conquered by their own species. Ma'am, you're absolutely right. This is about survival. But you're thinking like Galactic Standard military doctrine. I'm thinking like a human. He gestured to the tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet. They expect us to surrender because that's the logical choice. They've calculated the odds, determined the outcome, and issued their ultimatum. Very rational, very civilized. Marcus walked to the weapons control station and began entering new parameters. But humans have a saying, logic is the first casualty of warfare. The Korthak are about to learn why our species has spent thousands of years fighting itself. Commander Zethkar's forearms crossed over his chest. What exactly are you proposing, Marine? Marcus smiled again, and this time several species instinctively reached for their weapons. I'm proposing we show them what human military doctrine really looks like when the safety restraints come off. Marcus's fingers moved across the weapons control interface with practiced efficiency, bypassing safety protocols that would have taken other species hours to circumvent. The alien soldiers watched in fascination and growing alarm as systems throughout the station began reconfiguring themselves under his direction. What are you doing to our defensive systems? Commander Zethkar demanded, his scaled hands reaching for his sidearm. I'm not modifying your defensive systems, Marcus replied without looking up. I'm converting everything into offensive systems. The Korthak expect us to hide behind shields and wait for rescue. Instead, we're going to attack them. Captain Thrix's crystalline form pulsed with disbelief. Attack them? With what? This is a research station, not a battleship. Marcus pulled up a schematic of the facility that made several soldiers gasp. Instead of the familiar research station they knew, the display showed a vessel bristling with improvised weapons, converted systems, and jury-rigged offensive capabilities. Every fusion reactor can be overloaded and ejected as a torpedo. Every sensor array can be converted into a targeting laser. Every communications antenna can be turned into a particle beam projector. His hands continued working as he spoke. The Korthak are thinking like Galactic Standard military doctrine. We're going to think like humans. Lieutenant Vrexith's compound eyes tracked the changes appearing on the display. Those modifications are impossible. The power requirements alone would destroy the station, yes, Marcus confirmed. That's the point. The Korthak think we want to survive this encounter. They're wrong. We want to win it. There's a difference. The station shuddered again as Korthak ships moved into final attack positions. The enemy commander's voice echoed through the facility's speakers, the translation system rendering his words in cold mechanical tones. Coalition forces, your time has expired. Surrender now or face destruction. Marcus reached for the station's communication controls, but Commander Zethkar grabbed his arm with two of his four hands. Human, I cannot allow you to start an interstellar war with an unauthorized response. Marcus looked at the commander's scaled grip on his arm, then up at the alien's face. Sir, with all due respect, they started the war when they threatened a coalition facility with superior force. I'm just planning to finish it. He gently removed Zethkar's hands and activated the communications array. When he spoke, his voice carried the calm confidence of a professional soldier addressing an enemy. Korthak vessels, this is Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen of the Terran Marine Corps. Your demand for surrender is denied. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from this system before we demonstrate why humans have never been successfully conquered. The silence that followed Marcus's transmission was broken by chittering laughter from several Korthak ships. Their commander's response carried clear amusement. Human, we have 40 ships and thousands of warriors. You have a research station with minimal weapons. Your bravado is noted and dismissed. Marcus smiled and began initiating the weapon conversions he had programmed. Throughout the station, fusion reactors began overcharging. Sensor arrays rotated to target the enemy fleet, and communications equipment started generating focused energy bursts. Korthak Commander, you're making the same mistake every human's enemy has made throughout our history. You're assuming we're rational. Marcus's finger hovered over the final activation control. But humans aren't rational when we're angry. And right now, I'm very angry. He pressed the control, and the entire station transformed. The first fusion reactor ejected toward the Korthak flagship like a miniature star, its containment field failing precisely as Marcus had calculated. The explosion lit up the system like a second sun, vaporizing 3 enemy ships and severely damaging 5 others. Before the Korthak could respond, converted sensor arrays began firing concentrated particle beams at their formation. The beams weren't designed as weapons, but at close range they carved through enemy shields like they were paper. 2 more ships erupted in flames as their reactors were breached. Impossible, Commander Zethkar breathed, watching the tactical display in amazement. How did you know those modifications would work? Because humans have been jury-rigging weapons since we discovered fire, Marcus replied, his hands flying over the controls as he targeted the next wave of attacks. We've turned farming tools into weapons, civilian aircraft into bombers, and kitchen chemicals into explosives. Converting a research station into a weapons platform is just Tuesday for us. The Korthak fleet was beginning to recover from their surprise, returning fire with their military-grade weapons. The station's improvised shields held for several seconds before beginning to fail under the sustained assault. Marcus, Captain Thrix called out, her crystalline form flickering as power fluctuated throughout the facility. Their return fire is overloading our systems. We can't sustain this kind of damage, and we don't need to sustain it, Marcus replied calmly. We just need to hurt them worse than they hurt us. He activated the next phase of his plan. The station's entire communications array focused into a single massive transmission burst, aimed directly at the Korthak command ship. The energy discharge was powerful enough to burn out electronics across half their fleet, leaving dozens of ships blind and helpless. Lieutenant Vrexith watched enemy vessels spinning out of control, their navigation systems fried by the communications attack. Their formation is collapsing. How did you know that would work? Because I read their technical specifications while you were all arguing about surrender, Marcus answered. Korthak ships use centralized electronic warfare systems, overload the central processors, and the entire network fails. It's efficient design, but it creates a single point of failure. The station shook violently as more enemy fire struck their position, but Marcus continued working with mechanical precision. Warning alarms blared throughout the facility as critical systems began failing, but he showed no sign of panic or fear. Human, Commander Zethkar said quietly. We are dying. The station cannot survive much more damage. Marcus nodded without stopping his work. Yes, sir. But so are they, and that's all that matters. He initiated the final sequence of his plan. Every remaining system on the station, from life support to artificial gravity, began channeling power into a single massive energy discharge. The station itself became a weapon, preparing to unleash everything it had in one devastating attack. What you're seeing, Marcus said to the alien soldiers gathered around him, is why humans have never been successfully conquered. We don't fight to win. We fight to make the other guy lose, even if it costs us everything. The station's power levels reached critical as Marcus prepared to fire their ultimate weapon. Outside, the surviving Korthak ships were regrouping for what they thought would be the final assault on a crippled research facility. They had no idea they were about to face the full fury of human warfare doctrine, condensed into a single, desperate act of defiance that would either save them all or destroy everything in the system. All hands, Marcus announced over the station speakers. his voice carrying the calm authority of a Marine who had already accepted his fate. "Brace for final attack. Semper Fi." The energy discharge that erupted from Defense Station Kepler 442c was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Every system Marcus had converted fired simultaneously, creating a focused beam of pure destruction that carved through the Korthak formation like a sword through silk. The Korthak flagship, confident in its superior shields and armor, simply ceased to exist. The energy beam struck its central hull and the entire vessel exploded from within, its reactor containment failing catastrophically. The explosion created a chain reaction that destroyed 6 more ships in the immediate vicinity. But Marcus wasn't finished. As the station's power systems overloaded and began failing, he activated emergency protocols that no rational military doctrine would ever consider. Life support systems were rerouted to boost weapon power. Artificial gravity generators were reconfigured to create localized gravitational anomalies that sent enemy ships spinning helplessly through space. Even the station's waste reclamation systems were converted into projectile launchers, firing debris at velocities that turned garbage into kinetic weapons capable of penetrating military-grade hull plating. "This is madness," Lieutenant Vrexith shouted over the alarm klaxons, his compound eyes tracking the destruction on the tactical display. "You're destroying the station to attack them." "Exactly," Marcus replied, his voice completely calm despite the chaos around them. "The Korthak expected us to prioritize survival over victory. They calculated wrong." Commander Zethkar stared at the human in amazement and horror. "Your species willingly destroys itself to defeat enemies?" "When necessary," Marcus confirmed. "We call it taking them with us. It's a human tradition." The station shuddered as another series of explosions rocked the facility. But now the damage was coming from their own weapons overloading rather than enemy fire. The Korthak fleet was in complete disarray, with more than half their ships destroyed or disabled by the sustained assault. Captain Thrix's crystalline form was barely visible now, her energy reserves depleted from trying to maintain critical systems. "Marcus, we're losing life support. Oxygen levels are dropping throughout the station." "How long do we have?" Marcus asked, still working at his controls even as sparks erupted from overloaded circuits around him. "Maybe 20 minutes, she replied weakly. Marcus nodded and checked the tactical display. 18 Korthak ships remained operational, but they were scattered and confused. Their formation had collapsed entirely, and several vessels were already trying to withdraw to a safe distance. "That's plenty of time," he said, beginning a new sequence of commands. "Time for what?" Commander Zethkar demanded. "To make them remember this," Marcus answered. "The Korthak need to understand that attacking humans carries a price. Every surviving ship needs to go home with a story that will keep their people awake at night." He activated the station's self-destruct sequence, but with modifications that turned the controlled destruction into a weapon. Instead of simply exploding, the station would break apart in calculated stages, each section becoming a massive projectile aimed at the remaining enemy vessels. "You're going to ram them with pieces of the station?" Lieutenant Vrexith asked in disbelief. "Why not?" Marcus replied. "We can't use it anymore, and it's got enough mass to punch through their armor. Waste not, want not." The first section of the station detached with a sound like thunder, its emergency thrusters firing to accelerate it toward a cluster of Korthak ships. The enemy vessels tried to evade, but they were too close and the debris was moving too fast. The impact destroyed one ship completely and crippled 2 others. As more sections of the station began breaking away in controlled demolitions, the remaining Korthak ships finally understood what they were facing. This wasn't standard military engagement. This was total warfare conducted by a species that had never learned the concept of acceptable losses. The Korthak commander's voice came over the communication array, his earlier confidence replaced by fear and confusion. "Human vessel, we demand you cease this attack immediately. Your actions violate all civilized rules of warfare." Marcus laughed, a sound that made every alien soldier in the command center step back involuntarily. "Sir, humans wrote the book on uncivilized warfare. We've been perfecting it for thousands of years." He launched another section of the station, this one packed with improvised explosives that detonated just before impact, turning solid debris into a cloud of high-velocity shrapnel that shredded 3 more enemy ships. "Besides," Marcus continued, "you were the ones who demanded immediate surrender or total destruction. I'm just giving you the total destruction part." The surviving Korthak ships were now in full retreat, their engines burning at maximum power as they tried to escape the system. But Marcus had anticipated this as well. The final sections of the station were positioned to intercept their escape routes, forcing the enemy vessels to choose between running a gauntlet of debris or staying to fight a battle they couldn't win. Most chose to run. The last operational Korthak ship took severe damage from a chunk of the station's reactor shielding, but managed to limp away toward hyperspace. As it prepared to jump, its commander sent one final transmission. "Human, what you have done here today will not be forgotten. The Dominion will remember this." Marcus keyed the communication array for the last time, speaking directly to the retreating enemy commander. "Good, make sure you tell them exactly what happened here. Tell them that one human marine, with improvised weapons and a research station, destroyed 40 of your best ships. The Korthak vessel vanished into hyperspace, carrying word of the battle back to their home territory." In the command center, the surviving alien soldiers stared at Marcus with expressions ranging from awe to terror. The human stood calmly amid the wreckage of their facility, checking his equipment as if he had just completed a routine training exercise. "The life support failure is accelerating," Captain Thrix reported weakly. "We have maybe 10 minutes before the atmosphere becomes unbreathable." Marcus nodded and activated his personal distress beacon. "Coalition rescue ships should arrive within 6 hours. The emergency shelters in Section C are still intact. We can last that long on stored oxygen if we're careful." Commander Zethkar approached the human slowly, his forearms hanging loose at his sides. "Marcus, I need to ask you something. What you did here today, the willingness to sacrifice everything for victory, is this normal for your species?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Sir, what I did today was standard operating procedure for a Marine in a no-win situation. Any human soldier would have done the same thing. Most human civilians would have done the same thing. We just don't know how to give up." Lieutenant Vrexth's mandibles clicked nervously. "And if the Korthak return with a larger fleet? Then we'll destroy that one too," Marcus replied simply. "Humans have a saying, you can kill us, but you can't eat us. Eventually, even winning becomes too expensive for our enemies." As they made their way to the emergency shelters, Captain Thrix asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "Marcus, why didn't you tell us humans were this dangerous before the attack started?" Marcus paused at the shelter entrance and looked back at the destruction they had wrought. 40 Korthak ships destroyed by a single research station, and one Marine who refused to surrender. "Because," he said quietly, "we were hoping you'd never need to know." 6 hours later, Coalition rescue ships arrived to find the scattered debris of Defense Station Kepler 442c, floating in space like a monument to impossible victory. The emergency shelters in Section C had held, keeping the surviving personnel alive on stored oxygen and emergency power. Admiral Kexvara of the Coalition fleet stood in the shuttle bay of her flagship, watching as the survivors were brought aboard. Her species, the tall, graceful Etherians, were known for their calm, analytical nature, but even she seemed shaken by the reports she had received. "Staff Sergeant Chen," she called out as Marcus stepped off the rescue shuttle. "I need a full debriefing on what happened here." Marcus snapped to attention, his Marine training evident despite the exhaustion that lined his face. "Ma'am, hostile forces attacked a Coalition facility. The attack was repelled with enemy casualties numbering approximately 38 vessels destroyed and multiple others damaged. Coalition casualties were minimal. The Admiral's ethereal features shifted in what might have been confusion. "Sergeant, according to our sensor readings, you faced a full Korthak battle fleet with a research station. How is that possible?" Before Marcus could answer, Commander Zethkar approached, his scaled form moving with obvious respect for the human. "Admiral, with permission, the human's report does not adequately describe what occurred. What we witnessed was unprecedented." Admiral Kexavara gestured for them to continue. Around them, other survivors gathered to listen, their faces showing the same mixture of awe and concern that had marked their expressions since the battle ended. "Ma'am," Zethkar continued, "the human converted a civilian research facility into a weapons platform using nothing but standard maintenance tools and tactical improvisation. He destroyed enemy vessels with repurposed fusion reactors, communications equipment, and debris from our own station." Captain Thrix, her crystalline form now somewhat restored by the ship's power grid, added her own testimony. Admiral, he sacrificed the entire station to ensure enemy defeat. He showed no concern for his own survival, only for complete destruction of hostile forces. The Admiral's elongated fingers drummed against her arm in the Etherean gesture of deep thought. And the Korthak response to these tactics? Lieutenant Vrexith stepped forward, his compound eyes reflecting the shuttle bay's lights. Ma'am, the surviving enemy vessels withdrew in full retreat. Their final transmission indicated significant psychological impact from the engagement. Admiral Kexvara turned to Marcus, her large eyes studying his face intently. Sergeant Chen, I need to understand something. The tactics you employed today, are these standard human military doctrine? Marcus considered his answer carefully. Ma'am, the specific improvisations were situational, but the underlying principles, total commitment to victory, conversion of all available resources into weapons, willingness to accept complete destruction rather than surrender. Yes, ma'am. Those are standard human military doctrine. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment processing this information. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made everyone in the shuttle bay pay attention. Sergeant, Coalition intelligence has been analyzing Korthak communications since your battle. The psychological impact appears to be significant. They're referring to the engagement as the human demonstration and have begun reassessing their expansion plans. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. However, there are concerns within Coalition Command about human military capabilities. Some species are questioning whether Earth should be granted full military partnership if human tactics are this extreme. Marcus straightened, his expression becoming carefully neutral. Ma'am, humans understand those concerns. We've been dealing with them ourselves for thousands of years, and explain. Admiral, every human military commander faces the same dilemma: how to use maximum force effectively while maintaining moral authority. We've developed extensive protocols for escalation management, rules of engagement, and civilian protection. What you saw today was human doctrine under extreme circumstances, not standard operational procedure, Commander Zethkar interjected. But the willingness to sacrifice everything for victory, surely this makes humans dangerous allies as well as enemies. Marcus nodded slowly. Sir, that's a fair concern. But consider this: humans are equally committed to protecting our allies. The same determination that makes us dangerous to enemies makes us absolutely reliable to friends. We will never abandon an ally, never surrender strategic positions, and never accept defeat as long as alternatives exist. Captain Thrix's crystalline form pulsed with interest. But what if human and coalition objectives diverge? What if your commitment to victory conflicts with coalition policy? That's why we have command structures, ma'am, Marcus replied. Human soldiers follow orders from authorized commanders regardless of species. Our loyalty is to the mission and the unit, not to personal survival or even human interests specifically. Admiral Kexavara had been listening intently to this exchange. Sergeant Chen, I'm going to ask you a hypothetical question. If Coalition Command ordered you to surrender a position that could be held through human tactics, would you comply? Marcus met her gaze directly. Ma'am, if lawful orders directed tactical withdrawal, human forces would comply immediately. But if those orders were issued due to underestimating human capabilities, we would respectfully request permission to demonstrate alternatives before compliance. And if permission were denied, then we would comply, ma'am. But we would also file detailed tactical assessments explaining why the position could have been held. For future reference. The Admiral's expression suggested she was beginning to understand something important. You're saying humans can control these combat instincts when necessary? Ma'am, humans have been controlling these instincts for centuries. We've fought alongside dozens of different nations, ideologies, and military traditions on Earth. We know how to integrate with command structures while maintaining tactical effectiveness. Lieutenant Vrexith clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. But the psychological impact on enemies, that cannot be controlled, can it? Marcus smiled slightly, the expression making several aliens step back instinctively. Sir, that's actually the most controllable aspect of human warfare. We can scale our psychological operations from mild intimidation to complete terror, depending on mission requirements. The Korthak experienced the complete terror level, Commander Zethkar observed. Yes, sir, because they threatened coalition personnel with superior force and demanded immediate surrender. That triggered human protective instincts at maximum intensity. Admiral Kexvara had heard enough. Sergeant Chen, I'm recommending to Coalition Command that human military integration proceed as planned. However, I'm also recommending that all Coalition species receive briefings on human tactical doctrine to prevent misunderstandings in future joint operations. She paused, looking around at the assembled survivors. What happened here today will become required study at Coalition Military Academy. Not just the tactics, but the mindset behind them. All our personnel need to understand what humans bring to the Coalition and how to work with it effectively. Marcus nodded respectfully. Ma'am, human military instructors would be honored to assist with those briefings. As they prepared to board the main ship for transit back to Coalition headquarters, Captain Thrix approached Marcus privately. Human, I have one more question. Today, when you were converting the station into weapons, you showed no fear of death. How is this possible? Marcus considered her question seriously. Ma'am, humans do fear death, but we fear failure more. We fear letting down our comrades, abandoning our responsibilities and leaving problems for future generations to solve. When those fears outweigh fear of death, humans become very dangerous and very valuable as allies, she observed. Yes, ma'am, that's the idea. As they traveled back through hyperspace, word of the Battle of Kepler 442c spread throughout the galaxy, carrying with it a simple message that every species would soon learn by heart. Humans never surrender. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler 442c, the Coalition Military Academy hosted its first interspecies tactical symposium. Representatives from 47 different worlds gathered to discuss the integration of human military doctrine into galactic defense protocols. Marcus stood before an auditorium filled with military officers, diplomats, and strategic analysts from across the galaxy. The same alien soldiers who had once mocked Earth's primitive warfare now listened with respectful attention as he explained human tactical philosophy. The fundamental difference, Marcus was saying, between human military doctrine and standard galactic practice is our definition of acceptable losses. Most species calculate acceptable losses as a percentage of forces that can be sacrificed to achieve an objective. Humans calculate acceptable losses as anything less than total failure. Commander Zethkar, now promoted to colonel and serving as liaison for Coalition Human Military Integration, raised one of his forearms. Sergeant Chen, can you explain how this philosophy affects unit cohesion and morale? Marcus nodded, pulling up a holographic display showing battle formations. Sir, when human soldiers know their commanders will never abandon them, and they will never be ordered to surrender a position that can be held, it creates absolute trust within the unit. Soldiers fight harder because they know their sacrifice has meaning. Captain Thrix, her crystalline form now bearing the insignia of a Coalition tactical instructor, added her perspective. But this also creates enormous pressure on human commanders. How do you make tactical decisions when failure is not an option? Ma'am, failure is always an option, Marcus replied. Humans fail constantly. The difference is how we respond to failure. When a human unit fails to achieve its primary objective, we immediately begin planning how to achieve it with reduced resources, modified tactics, or acceptable alternative outcomes. The holographic display shifted to show the destroyed Korthak fleet, with technical analysis of the improvised weapons that had defeated them. The key is adaptability. Humans assume that initial plans will fail, so we train extensively in tactical improvisation and resource conversion. Admiral Kexvara stood from her position in the front row. Sergeant, the Coalition has reviewed human historical military records extensively. One question keeps arising. How does your species maintain this level of military effectiveness without destroying yourselves through constant warfare? Marcus smiled. And by now most of the audience had learned to recognize that expression as a sign of incoming wisdom rather than threat. Ma'am, that's exactly why we maintain this level of effectiveness. Humans learned centuries ago that the best way to prevent wars is to be so obviously dangerous that enemies choose negotiation instead. He gestured to include the entire auditorium. Every species here represents a civilization that achieved interstellar travel without destroying their homeworld. Humans achieved interstellar travel despite spending most of our history trying to destroy our homeworld. We had to develop military doctrine that could end conflicts quickly, because prolonged warfare would have killed everyone. Lieutenant Vrexth, now serving as a Coalition intelligence analyst, clicked his mandibles in understanding. So human military aggression is actually a form of conflict prevention? Exactly, sir. When enemies understand that attacking humans guarantees their total destruction, regardless of the cost to humanity, they tend to choose diplomatic solutions instead. The questions continued for hours, covering everything from human logistics capabilities to psychological operations techniques. But as the symposium drew to a close, Admiral Kexavara stood to address the broader implications of human military integration. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications," she began, "what we have learned from the Battle of Kepler 442c extends beyond tactical doctrine. We have discovered that the Coalition now possesses a deterrent capability, unlike anything in galactic history." The auditorium fell silent as she continued. "The Korthek Dominion has abandoned their expansion plans entirely. The hegemony of Vale has requested formal peace negotiations. 6 different pirate organizations have ceased operations in Coalition space. The psychological impact of human military capability has fundamentally altered the strategic balance of our region." She paused, looking directly at Marcus. "Sergeant Chen, on behalf of the Coalition Council, I am authorized to offer Earth full military partnership, including access to all Coalition defensive technologies and participation in strategic planning at the highest levels." Marcus stood and came to attention. "Ma'am, on behalf of the Terran Marine Corps and the government of Earth, I am honored to accept that partnership. Humans look forward to serving alongside our Coalition allies in defense of civilized space." Commander Zethkar stood as well, his forearms moving in a gesture of respect. "Human Marcus, there is one more question I must ask. Your species has shown us warfare beyond anything we imagined possible. What do humans consider the highest military virtue?" Marcus thought for a moment, considering the weight of his answer. "Sir, the highest military virtue for humans is knowing when not to fight. Our capacity for destruction is matched by our responsibility to use it wisely. The goal of human military doctrine is not victory in war, but the prevention of war through the promise of absolute victory." Captain Thrix's crystalline form pulsed with approval. "You fight to end fighting. Yes, ma'am. Humans have learned that the only way to achieve lasting peace is to make war too terrible to contemplate. Our willingness to sacrifice everything in battle serves a larger purpose, ensuring that battles become unnecessary." As the symposium concluded, representatives from dozens of species approached Marcus with questions, requests for training partnerships, and invitations to visit their homeworlds. The human who had been dismissed as primitive just months earlier was now sought after as the galaxy's premier military strategist, but perhaps the most significant moment came when a young Korthak cadet approached him nervously. The insectoid being species had been humanity's enemy at Kepler 442c, but now they were seeking to understand rather than conquer. "Sergeant Chen," the cadet said in halting Coalition standard, "my people sent me to ask, if humans never surrender, how do wars end?" Marcus smiled gently, recognizing the genuine curiosity in the young being's question. "The same way they've always ended, cadet. One side decides the cost of continuing is higher than the cost of stopping. Humans just make that decision easier by raising the cost of continuing. And if both sides are human, then they talk until they find a solution both sides can live with. Because humans may be stubborn about fighting, but we're even more stubborn about survival." As the cadet walked away, clearly deep in thought, Admiral Kexavara approached Marcus one final time. "Sergeant, I have one last question for my personal understanding. Today you spoke of preventing war through military strength. But what drives individual humans to fight with such determination when war does come?" Marcus looked out through the Academy's viewports at the stars beyond, thinking of Earth and the long history that had brought humanity to this moment. "Ma'am, humans fight like that because we remember. We remember every person who died for freedom, every soldier who held impossible positions, every civilian who chose death over surrender. We fight for them and for the people who will come after us. We fight so that future generations won't have to." He turned back to meet her gaze. "But most of all, ma'am, we fight like that because we're human, and humans never surrender." The words echoed through the Academy halls, carrying with them the weight of history and the promise of an unbreakable alliance. Across the galaxy, the message was clear. Humanity had joined the galactic community not as conquered subjects or junior partners, but as the guardians who would ensure that civilization itself would never surrender to the darkness between the stars. In the years that followed, the phrase "humans never surrender" would become more than just a military doctrine. It would become the foundation of a peace that lasted because everyone understood the price of breaking it. And in the depths of space, where new threats waited in the cosmic dark, that understanding would prove to be humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy.